What time is it?
Okay, we have some fabulous live music later on, but right now, here's the kind I prefer.
How did you first connect with Ice-T?
So a mutual friend said, do you want to meet Ice-T? Do you like him? I said, I mean, who doesn't like Ice-T?
Yeah.
You know,
Well,
musically.
The other book you wrote with him a couple of years ago was fantastic as well.
Thank you so much. So that's the book. So back in that book came out in 2011. We probably started working on it in 2009. And I got introduced to him, and his first question was, he wanted to do a book about Coco and he having this kind of crazy rock and roll marriage. But it was like Coco's this, beautiful swimsuit model. And Ice has been a player, but like he could have any woman, but he chooses to be faithful to her. So it's kind of like, we get this rock and roll lifestyle, but yet we're a domestic couple. So I show up and people said, what was Coco like? I'm like, well, she was literally vacuuming the apartment. Like she's just, these are regular people. And so what happened was then he starts telling me about this idea and I'm thinking it over and I'm kind of going, so I think they ended up doing a reality show, right? Called Ice Loves Coco, which was kind of, I think, based on I Love Lucy. I think they had a show on VH1 or something, but that was after. So I'm thinking about this going, a relationship book by Ice-T and Coco. I mean, that's not really the kind of thing I write. I've been writing crime and then I don't know, Ice and I were talking and he basically said, well, I asked him about the gangs in LA and I was ignorant enough at that time to not know that he was born in New Jersey. And then he said, my dad raised me for a while but on his own because my mom died when I was 7. And then my dad died when I was 11. I don't have any siblings. So I got sent out to Los Angeles and that nearest high school was Crenshaw. And I was like, oh, wait, you were orphaned and you got sent to the ground zero of where the gang violence was just exploding at that point. Yeah. And I was like, well, what? And then he starts telling me about how he was, he got his girlfriend pregnant she was 16 and he's 18. So he didn't have a way to support her. So he joins the Army, US Army. And then he goes to jump training school. So he's a parachutist, but then he gets, a position at the Tropic Lightning. I said, so you did your service in the Army? And I didn't know all this. I didn't know all Ice-T's biography. So I said, this is your book. Like, have you ever told your memoir? And he had already done a book, The Ice Opinion, Who Gives a Fuck? So he goes, no, I mean, I've told it in my lyrics. And there's one, I Must Stand, which is a great song, where he says, tough to be an orphan at an early age, that impressionable stage, no love brings rage. But he says, mom's died when I was 7, pops died 11, what's up in heaven with heaven? But it's like, he says it so matter-of-factly, most people probably haven't thought about that. So anyway, that became our first book where I was like, and the New York Times ended up calling it he is hip hop's Horatio Alger story, meaning that's the old American expression for a man who's completely self-made. Because Ice did. He made his own success. He didn't have any assistance. He didn't have any financial help from anybody. He's an American success story from absolute nothing. He's just an orphaned boy who had no, like the first time he heard the words, I love you, another thing that just blew me away. He said, my parents loved me, but they never used to say, I love you. So the first time anybody ever said, I love you was some guys in the Crips. And I was like, wow. And so that also helps a lot of people understand why people are drawn to gangs, because they may not have love. They may not have family that are, and then somebody says, I love you. And it's like another guy, it's a gangbang or whatever. It's like, now you'll die for these people, because it's not just about violence and territoriality. It's also about a family. Yeah. They actually feel like family to each other. I'm not defending, I'm not defending joining a but that's the appeal of it.
A sense of belonging there.
Yep.
That I think.
And you're valued. You're valued by some other human. Maybe because a lot of people, unfortunately, of all races, I mean, of all ethnicities, Black, Hispanic, Jewish, a lot of people grow up in environments maybe where nobody acts like they love them, right? So you're drawn towards a brotherhood or some other thing. But anyway, so that's how we got that. And then he called me up 10 years later. That book was very well received, very well reviewed. And he called me up and said, yo, I got a book deal. If you want to, I don't know if your next question is going to be, how did you come to write Split Decision? But he already knew me. So Spike came out of prison and wanted to write a book. And, I said, no. He said, and Spike will tell you, Ice is ice. Like if his no's mean no and his yeses mean yes. And he told Spike no for about a year because he said, Spike, every guy that goes to prison comes out and thinks they have a book to tell. And a lot of them do, but it's like, and then he said, the only thing that makes you special is me. You have a friend who was just like you, but I made it. We made different choices. And that was, I mean, that whole concept. So this whole concept was Ice-T's, like, he's great at concepts. He's great at ideas. So that was his whole concept. And then, you know, he called me up and he said, Doug, I have a deal at Simon & Schuster. They want you. I'll explain why they wanted me. Because publishers want to deal with a known commodity. And I've written enough books that I know, and you're a writer, deadline is, they say there's no muse like deadline. You can wait around forever going, but if your article is due tomorrow morning, your book is due on the 1st of May. Well, nobody wants to hear, I wasn't inspired. I mean, some people might say it. So like Ice's manager said to me, you know, Doug, Ice fucks with you. For those who don't speak street, Ice likes to work with you because you're reliable and you're talented. And I said, okay, what do you mean? He goes, there's a lot of people have talent, but they might not be reliable. And there's a lot of people who are very reliable fixing cars or mowing lawns or school teachers, but they're reliable as hell. They'll be on time, but they're not talented. So to be both. So in any event, that's, publishers want to deal with a guy who's written books before, knows how to turn them in on a deadline, will make revisions promptly. And I have that reputation now. So plus Ice is just, I vibe with him. We've never had any, we've always been friendly with each other. I'm not, like, Ice has an inner circle. And it's funny because I realized, oh, I'm close with Ice. Like, I'll leave him messages and we'll fuck around. But he says his definition, because he has a lot of people around him. He goes, my definition of like who's my family, because he has Coco and his daughter Chanel. But my close friends will be the people that are at my house and they can go get something out of the fridge without even asking me. And I was like, well, I would never do that. Like, I might go to Ice's house, I wouldn't do that. But I asked Spike, hey Spike, if you were at Ice's house and you wanted some, like, you know, some Gatorade or some, oh yeah, I just go get it. I was like, yeah, okay, so you're like family to him. And one of the things people talk about the loyalty in this book, and I think it's in the prose at the end. I've wrote it out. Ice says, I'm an orphan. I never had brothers and sisters, so my friends are the only family I've got. So he said, Spike never crossed me. Spike never fucked me over. So why wouldn't I be loyal to him? He's my brother. His circle, Al P, Shawnee Sean, these are the guys, you know, anybody knows 6 a.m. Shawnee Sean was the driver known to give freaks hell. Oh, he's just real dude from high school. He's another one that, you know, I think we put it in the first book, and I don't think Ice would mind me saying this. Ice had a bunch of stolen goods when he was a player. Ice had a bunch of shit in a house where Shawnee Sean was a weed dealer. Shawnee Sean had a bunch of weed. Again, this isn't so bad. Weed is legalized in Canada, a lot of the states. So he's selling weed. Ice has some hot merchandise. Police bust Shawnee Sean for the weed, and he takes the weight for all this stolen shit. He didn't give up. You know, he's not. I hate that. You know, no snitching. That's a code, but he didn't give up. Ice. And I said to me, Doug, there'd be no Ice-T if Sean hadn't taken that rap from me, because like I was just getting my rap career off the ground. So he's got friends that would. This is the old school, like. A friend of mine, well, the Russian mob book, it's about a Russian mobster, but his niece read Split Decision, and she said, she called me after reading the book, and she said, I was in tears, and she said, you don't find loyalty like that anymore, like that kind of loyalty. I mean, you might, but you know, even the mob guys aren't loyal to each other. You know, the stuff, these people that take a blood oath to be loyal on pain of death, they break that oath. So this is a rare this is old school loyalty. Like, I'll go to prison for my friend. I will not talk. I will be, you know, in the case of Spike, come home and just go to work, just working for Ice. You know, he's working for head of security, like he says. It's just a title. I'm just there to coordinate with the venue. But Ice and Spike, they're pretty funny about it. They're like, man, I'll just go, you know, if Little Ice wants to go hang out in Prague in the Czech Republic, and I'll go to make sure I'm Uncle Spike. Nobody's gonna fuck with him. Metal is huge in Europe, so they have these outdoor festivals like Hellfest, Wacken. There's like 100,000 people, and Ice has got to be in that mindset. His body count is a pretty aggressive, you know, talk shit, get shot kind of sound, right? he can't be thinking about, is his daughter okay? He's got to have somebody there. And he said, why would I pay somebody when I got a friend that I trust? And that's what's beautiful about his world. His inner circle are his best friends, and he's made it that way. So I don't know. I have siblings. I don't know if you do, but you know, I have two blood brothers. I have two older brothers. If imagine being in the world, thrown into the world, and you're a young boy, you're 11 years old, and you have no siblings, and you have no parents. And that's one of the reasons Ice never got high in his life, doesn't drink. And I said to him, he told me once, it gave him a lot of power within the Crips, you know, as an associate or as a, you know, he was affiliated with the Crips. He goes, if you're sober, a lot of the gangbangers can be, you know, smoking sherm or, you know, weed or getting drunk. He said the sober guy is usually the driver. The sober guy is the guy that talks to the cops. So that actually gives you a lot of authority within your little clique. And I quoted that back to him, and he said, I said, that's the reason you didn't really get drunk or high? He goes, oh, but also, Doug, remember, I'm an orphan. So I didn't feel I had the luxury to get fucked up, because I saw my friends getting fucked up, and somebody might try to rob them, and somebody might do this. And a lot of them had older brothers or family that would protect them. I didn't have anybody. So one of the reasons Ice is the way he is he's always been just self-contained. I think now he has a loving wife and daughter, but he was just thrown into this world. Like, you don't get the name Ice. And he's got that look sometimes, like nothing's going to faze him.
What do you attribute your ability to write about such a diverse array of subjects to?
I guess curiosity. Like, I know people that only write about hip hop. I know people that only write about mafia and that's their specialty. But I don't know. I mean, I'll just use music as a metaphor. I fuck with hip hop. I love reggae. I love dancehall reggae. I love jazz, some jazz, not all, not really, not full. I love the Beatles and the Stones. It's not like, I just love music. I love good music. So I don't want to be pigeonholed. And with writing, it's about, how do you tell a story? So yeah, this is one of my books about I just have a few of them. One of my books about the mafia. No, I mean, I was looking at what I have sitting here. I have, you know, a book about the Italian mafia, this book about the Russian mafia. What happens is, when I am approached to do a subject, or I have to immerse myself completely in it and feel like I understand it. And then I kind of fall in love with the world, right? So I don't know. I mean, if you just were doing the same thing over and over again, I don't think your curiosity would be the same, right? Like, I want to write something now about World War II, and it's a lot of research because I don't know some of the things very well. But it's like, I know that by the time I'm done this, I will be a specialist in this one little area, right? I wrote a book about boxing. I'm not a boxing historian, but I'm an expert on Barney Ross, this great Jewish boxer who was the lightweight, welterweight champion of the world. And
I ordered that book today when I was prepping for this.
Oh, thanks, man. Appreciate it. I mean, it's a short little read, but what are the things, I mean, for any of your circle that are authors or aspiring authors, you know, sometimes things will come to you and you'll be overwhelmed by, how can I learn all this? And I'll give you a really good tip that I just learned a couple years ago. So I wrote this book, was a bestseller, called Hunting El Chapo, right? It was with the DE agent, Drew Hogan, who literally put together the operation. It was a massive operation. This guy was uncatchable, right? For years, he was the most wanted man in the world, $10 million reward. And when I met Andrew, he brought me all this hierarchical charts of the Sinaloa cartel. And I mean, and it's Spanish names, and people are related to cousins. And I'm like, how am I going to learn this? And I kind of got overwhelmed. And he had some bourbon. He's a guy from the Midwest. He's from Illinois. And he's a cop, like a typical, he just looks like a cop, like tall, blonde, Irish. He was like the only guy in his family to become a cop, because every other guy was a fireman. That kind of guy. But he became law enforcement. He was a state, what do you call it, deputy sheriff, not a state trooper, but became a DEA. Good Midwestern guy. So he shows up, we're drinking some bourbon. It was like this 3-day weekend, because he was working in Rome at that time, and I was trying to figure out how I would possibly learn everything about the Sinaloa cartel and the various different cartels. And he said, Doug, relax. You don't have to know everything about El Chapo or about the Sinaloa. You just have to become an expert on me. You have to know what I know. And so I became an expert on what he did and what his case was. You could ask me some other question about Los Zetas or other cartels. I don't know shit about it. I don't. I became an expert in the case about El Chapo. So I don't know if I'm answering your question, but it's generally when a project comes to me or I have an idea, it's a newfound curiosity, right? I don't know. It'd be like do you really want to have the same turkey sandwich every day for lunch? I usually do, by the way. But
to a point, maybe, but after a few days in a row of the same thing, even if it's your favorite food, you're gonna grow tired of it. So
yeah, but I mean, I also saw enough people working at newspapers where they had a beat, that the crime beat where even if you love music, and you're the concert reporter or whatever, and all you're doing is going to concerts. And maybe after a while, as diverse as the concert scene might be, covering music for the New York Times, maybe you'd like to write a story about a murder, an unsolved murder. Maybe you'd like to write a story about a baseball game. So I don't know. For me, the idea of learning a new subject is it's a challenge, and it's, how they say if you're in the gym and you're working out, like we all tend to do this, you work out or you run, you get in this rut of doing the same routine, and the trainers and the experts will always say, you got to shock your body, switch the workup out, do a different one. That's why they have all these different CrossFit workout of the day. If you just do the same thing over and over, it gets to be routine. So, I mean, I would love to write books about hip hop. I wish I could write. My favorite sport in the world is actually soccer. I love like European soccer, and I would love to write a book, but no American or Canadian. It's just not a popular subject. You can't sell. If I could write books about soccer, that would be the only thing I would do. But my personal passion is not necessarily what other people's is.
One of the things too, also, and I just want to congratulate you on some of the awards and recognitions you've received. The 2010 Kobe Awards for just speaking of, war and service. What was it like doing that book about Jack Jacobs? If not now, when?
That was Jack Jacobs is a Medal of Honor recipient in Vietnam, and he bravest guy and humble as can be. And he's a NBC and MSNBC military analyst. So again, I met him and I said, "What an amazing story! Let's do a book." And it was really fun because I got to go to 30 Rock. This was when that show was still on, Tina Fey,
yeah.
30 Rock, right? So I'd literally go because that's where NBC News is, and he'd be, I got to go on the air. So sometimes we'd just be sitting in an office, and I'd see like Tamron Hall, like these gorgeous anchor women, and I'd be like, I mean, it's nothing, TV is just a job like any other, but when you're there, you're like, wow. So yeah, we just sat there, and I went to his house in New Jersey. He was actually teaching I still think he teaches at West Point, and I said, "Where's your Medal of Honor? That's the highest." He goes, "You want to be honest? In my kitchen drawer." He said that the most guys who have the Medal of Honor, they don't brag about it. They don't talk about it, because I'll give you this amazing line. He said, there are a lot of guys who did it. He killed, I think, 22 Viet Cong, and he carried people to, you have to do something amazing to receive the Medal of Honor, the Congressional Medal of Honor. He said, a lot of guys did exactly what I did, but they were killed. Or a lot of guys did what I did and nobody saw them do it. And he said, to receive the Congressional Medal of Honor, 3 things have to happen. You have to do something, like you do something brave. Somebody has to witness it, and your commanding officer can't hate you. Because that's the other thing is, for years, Black African-American soldiers did not get the Congressional Medal of Honor. Jewish soldiers didn't get the Congressional Medal of Honor. It was just kind of, I don't know, there was a unwritten code. I guess the U.S. military was racist or whatever. Guess it was segregated, but it was kind of known Jews could. So they used to call the Silver Star the Jewish Congressional Medal of Honor, because Jews didn't get the Congressional Medal. That changed. Jack Jacobs is Jewish, and I'm sure there's been others. But it used to be, yes, you can't have a commanding officer who thinks, I'm not, because you have to be recommended for this award. So anyway, the thing I learned is that of the surviving, like, World War II era, to a man, they're the most humble. They don't go around saying, I am a Congressional Medal of. By the way, anytime you meet a military guy who tells you all his award, it's probably, he's not the bravest guy. The bravest guys are, and by the way, Jack, I'm not about 5'6". Jack is maybe 5'4". And he said, you know what? People who think you have to be John Wayne to be in the infantry have never been in battle.
Yeah.
If you're big, you're a bigger target. He goes, being small, I was quicker, faster. I could always do the most pull-ups like an ant. You know, your body's strong. He says, if you're in combat and you're my height, you're a lot smaller target. And he also said, you know, in a lot of ways, being short has its advantages. I can fly economy and it feels like first class. So he was a really self-deprecating guy. In fact, I never forget, we left NBC and I'm thinking, and he's done very well financially. And he's a Congressional Medal of Honor winner. And he goes, no, I always take the subway to the PATH train. That's our little, you know, and he had some of his gear in a little rolly, you know, suitcase. I think he had books to bring up to West Point. And I was like, and he drove a Subaru with 200,000 miles on it. And I was just, and then he has a big house, like huge house in New Jersey. But it was like Biggie said, more money, more problems. It's not necessarily true, but if you flash your money, there's more problems, right? So he lives the most humble, and you'd see him on the subway and you would never know this is a Congressional Medal of Honor, a high-ranking colonel. And if he hadn't left the military, he definitely would have been a general. He was on the path to be a high-ranking general, but there's no money in being a general. He went into Wall Street and made his money, but great guy. It was a great honor to work with him, and he's still a really good friend.
Given your rich history in investigative journalism, you certainly have a firm understanding of crime and the criminal justice system in America. Can you please discuss how, if at all, that affected you putting together Spike's story in Split Decision?
You mean the dysfunctionality of the criminal justice? Yeah. Well, it's a complex question because you realize a lot of guys go to prison, and I've known guys, and they tell me, especially if you went to prison as a juvenile, they'll say, you know, all I learned in prison was how to be a better criminal. You meet other criminals, you figure ways you won't get caught the next time. This is recidivism, right? When people go out and they break the law again. Spike actually did change. He went through a real transformation, and he went through all these self-helps and mentored kids and all those different things he had to do. But it made me realize that the U.S. justice system, first of all, it's clearly racist. I mean, you know, these reform sentencing things about, you know, what the difference between crack cocaine sentencing and powder cocaine sentencing, you know, that's clearly racist. The incarceration rate for African-American males. I mean, if you looked at Spike's family, and I want people to read the book, but he had all his brothers had prison records, and all his brothers were involved in violence, and his youngest brother is doing a life sentence now. That's not just bad family, or I mean, it's the socioeconomic conditions, the neighborhoods that these guys come from. I mean, I'm not a judge of anything that happened to Spike or Ice, because I got kicked out of high school. I was a shithead. Like, I was a good student, good enough to get into an Ivy League school and all that, but I was also a troublemaker. Like a lot of us, when, you know, teenage boys, you want to impress girls by being a rowdy and break into the school. And when we broke into the school and stole the tests, like, now you couldn't do it because there's alarms going off and everything and cameras everywhere. But we did that. And I thought, God, I mean, I could have got arrested. Now, I come from a middle class, 2-parent home in the suburbs. What if I had not had those advantages? What if I was and I'm not saying, like, what if I was Eminem growing up in 8 Mile or something? I might have gone to juvenile jail. And then before I know it, I'm on a path to something else. So I don't judge anybody's choices if they don't have that many options, right? And when Ice and Spike were coming up, Ice was asked this, and he said, we didn't see a lot of role models. There wasn't many doctors and lawyers in our neighborhood. The only role models we saw were the hustlers, the drug dealers. It's different now because you have Jay-Z and you have 50 Cent, who have taken basically the hustling street mentality and made themselves damn near billionaires, right? Yeah. So now kids can be more aspirational from bad neighborhoods. But I mean, there's a scene in the book when right before Ice records Cop Killer, I decided to do a flashback because Spike told me everything in order or different, but I didn't always tell the book in order. And he pretty much nearly got choked to death by these racist cops. And Ice and he both told me these were not stories that were rare. Every one of us either knew somebody who had the shit beat out of them or choked. And, you know, I think there's a line, I don't know if I kept it in the book, where Ice said, they started these gang sweeps in LA. I mean, obviously the gangs. I think there's 100. I think there are 100,000 gang members in LA, and you saw what happened to Nipsey Hussle. Rest in peace.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a. I mean, he was killed by a guy in his own set, a jealous guy, right? But this is a very violent world, and obviously the police have to do something. But Daryl Gates was a racist, that police commissioner, and they started these gang sweeps. And the rule was, if you were three young men of color, they could stop you as a suspected gang and fingerprint you at some big holding, I forget where, at the county. They used to bring everybody in for booking, and you were just on file as a suspected gang member. So Ice and Spike told me, yeah, you could only walk to the store with your homie, like two people. You could do it. You couldn't do it with three or four, because then you were a gang.
Wow.
Yeah, and that was what and so I said, so if we saw the cops, we'd fucking run. Like, we would run. And he said, now I'll meet white ladies or white people or maybe just middle-class people saying, well, if you didn't do anything wrong, why would you run from the police? Well, why would you want to be fingerprinted and put in the system if you didn't do anything wrong? And the other thing I'll tell my mother or people who don't really know this world, for a lot of men of color, it may be changing a bit, but after George Floyd and some of these other things, I don't think so. Any contact with the police is to be avoided, because you never know what could happen. You could be innocent and not want to have any problems, but it's like, so I think Spike experienced a lot of racism, but he also made a lot of bad choices. But having survived the criminal justice system, the California prison system, one of the things I learned most closely from him was how absolutely you're defined by your race, right? You are with your Crip set. So he's with the Harlem 30s. That's his group. And the Crips are with the Crips, but the blacks basically unite. So the Bloods and the Crips will be at odds with in California, it's divided. Norteños in the north, Sureños, just northerners and southerners. And they don't mix. And, I knew I could respect Spike's version of events when he would say stuff like, because braggarts would say something like, yeah, nobody fucked with us, Harlem 30s. He would say, I learned that the Hispanics have a disciplinary unit. Any prison I was in, they were the most powerful, because from the shot caller on down, he said, you might have a 50-year-old man just reading his Bible, minding his business, who's of Mexican descent, but if the shot caller says it's a race war, you're on, he's grabbing something and fighting. He said that wasn't true for all of us. It wasn't true for all. Blacks are not as united. There are, and there's the white groups too. But I mean, Ice and Spike both explained this to me. You could be players. So when you're from these neighborhoods, you are from 60s, you are from 30s, you are from ETG, the A-Trade gangsters. That's your neighborhood, and that you might get shot over being from that neighborhood. But they were players, meaning, thieves or, robbers. They would dress fly, they would wear Fila, they'd wear all these Fendi and, designer brands. So the gangbangers wouldn't fuck with them because they didn't dress with the pressed khakis and the look that we now know from Snoop and Nipsey Hussle. I mean, those guys really dressed like gangbangers. But if you were a player hustler, and drug dealers fit into the player hustler, you didn't get caught up in that gang banging thing. So they had diplomatic immunity to go to other neighborhoods and hustle. But that all goes out the window in prison. You become member of your gang. And like Spike said, there are no lone wolves. You might think you're going to go in there and do your time. That's a very scary cautionary tale. If anybody reads that book, you want to figure out, what would you do if you got thrown to prison for 3 or 4 years in California? You're going to join you're white, you're going to join the Aryan nations? Well, you might have to. They might be the only people that are going to protect you. And if you're Jewish, they're not going to take you. So I don't know where I would fit in. I mean, I just thought about it from the point of view of, wow, they call it a car. Like, what car are you in? You're just defined by your ethnicity. It's just brutal. So I think the incarceration rate in the United States is just off the charts compared to other Western countries. And we're just, I don't know. I don't want to go off on a speech about that, but it seems like, Eisenhower warned about the military industrial complex. I mean, I see there being a prison industrial complex because so much of it is for profit now, right?
Yeah.
And they use these prisoners to, do to work and used to be making
License plate.
license plate. Now it's something that's other stuff, but
Yeah.
There's definitely, there needs to be some kind of reform, and I'm not knowledgeable enough, but catching youthful offenders and maybe I think once a kid goes to a juvenile facility, his odds of going to prison are very, very high, I'm sure, right? Because you've been exposed to more tough, young criminals. So, I mean, there's got to be some better way that society can help turn people around. One of the reasons we did this book, and I just wonder if I'd ask your advice, is to hopefully stop kids from making these mistakes, right? And a lot of people have said to me, oh my God, this book is one of those things that it's so real. The language is so raw. I think it could stop kids. And I said, I don't know. Do you think when I was 14 to 17, you think I would listen to a 63-year-old man, Ice-T, or, I mean, you might say, yeah, that guy was an OG, but you're so arrogant and you think you're so smart when you're that age, right? You don't think you're going to die.
I like that it's twofold and that it, really provides both perspectives. And again, no disrespect, obviously, to someone like Ice-T or, Jay-Z's another one that comes to mind, people who kind of live that hustler life, live that crime life, and will say, rightfully so, hey, don't go this route, don't do this. But they essentially did it and got away with it, and then were able to thrive. So I think it's harder for people, younger people, older people, whoever, to hear that message coming just from them, because it's like, well, you can't tell me this is inevitable because look at what you did. Like it's so there are,
but also there nobody under 20 is really buying, like they're not listening to Ice-T. So
yeah,
trap. I mean, also, I mean, you'd have to school me. Trap used to be Trap House was the crack house. I assume the trap music. So there's an entire genre that's talking about selling crack. I mean, I've listened to Migos. They're talking about, drug dealing, right? At drill, I know the drill. I've been seeing these articles about drill rapper killed in New York. I don't know. This is another form of rap that seems to be prevalent with young people and making it sound cool to be in the streets. So it's an uphill battle to make it not seem like. But hip hop does not create crime. No. It just reflects the world that these people are.
But I think to your question, I like that there are two perspectives, and it really does boil down. Again, I don't want to give any spoilers away in the book, but where it's just like, oh, like, hey, I have to. Everybody, they kind of get to a point in each of their lives, and it's like, hey, I'm going to pursue this or I'm going to pursue that, and it really does, come down to, and it just made me think, and not to like toot my own horn, but just like what I said in my review, where it's just like we all think about, oh, what about that one time I did that? Or what about that one time I did that? What if I, didn't say, oh, wait a second, what about this? Or I didn't stop to tie my shoe and someone said, hey, like your whole life could potentially change from those single decisions. So I think what your book does, and props to you, Spike and Ice, for painting a masterful picture of it, is it really exemplifies how these single decisions can affect your whole life.
Where I think this book might resonate is exactly, and thank you for saying that, and thank you for pointing out, is like a guy like me. Well, you've had 3 beers. Should you have the 4th? Okay, you've had the 4th. Just pay for the Uber. Don't get behind the wheel thinking buzzed, because that's the kind of thing we'll fuck. And I said this on The View. And again, like Ice just has this way of speaking in like philosophical, like he'll say, he said that to his son once, I've been your age, you've never been mine. Shut the fuck up and listen. He just says stuff that's like, yeah, I've been true. An older person's I know what you're thinking, you little man, you think you're slick. He was on The View and he said, it's taken me years, 30 years, 40, whatever, to build my career to this point. In a second, he said it takes forever to go forward. Going backwards is instantaneous.
Yeah.
And he said, I could throw my whole career just by picking up this coffee cup and throwing it at the ground. I could destroy my career. One stupid misuse of you get canceled over misusing a pronoun or whatever nowadays. So people, I think this book could resonate with more than youthful, readers. Everyday people just stopping and thinking, wow, that's true. And I said it like, just going to the grocery stores. But there's things in life where you got that voice in the back of your head saying, it's not a good look. This is not a good idea. Don't drive the car when I'm buzzed, or don't risk this. that's what these book guys are both saying. Stop and think about that fork in the road. I mean, just stop and think, is this decision good for you and your family and all that? That's the impact this could have. And I mean, I really appreciate you talking about the craftsmanship, because these are their stories, so people understand how it works. This is Ice and Spike stories as told to me, and I had to weave it and figure out a way to cut them. So all the techniques in there, how it kind of cuts back and forth like a movie, I had to figure out ways that I could overlap these stories where early on you really see a robbery from Ice's point of view, from Spike's point of view, and then they gradually separate because Ice didn't go to prison for 26 years. Yeah. So if you notice, by the end of the book, Ice is kind of absent for a little while because he's just off. I was trying when Spike was doing his 26, he is 35 to life, but he ended up doing 26 years. Can I cut to Ice at like an award show? And I tried it a few times and I was like, it didn't, Spike was going through so much heavy shit, people dying. It didn't make sense to go to this, Ice as a superstar. If I could work with him on another book, I would do it in a minute, just because he is zero hassle, nicest guy in the world. And he's done this book basically as a labor of love for his friend, because we're trying to get Spike, speaking engagements and stuff like that, because Spike's the one that needs to tell these stories. Ice could tell everybody, but everybody's just going to look at him as, hey, you're a rich guy who's on TV. Hey, this is Doug Century. I'm a journalist and author. You're checking out westcoaststyles.com.
Okay, we have some fabulous live music later on, but right now, here's the kind I prefer.